What would you do if you saw your dead husband's eyes staring back at you from the face of a child you had never met? Not a painting, not a memory, but real, living eyes. That same rare shade of amber gold that made you fall in love 10 years ago. Now, blinking up at you through the rain, sat in the face of a shivering boy, clutching 2 babies to his chest. Welcome back to the Duke's Revenge, my friends. I have missed you. Before we begin tonight's story, tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your city and your local time in the comments. Whether you are curled up in bed in Lagos at midnight, driving through empty Texas highways at sunset, or stealing a quiet moment in London before dawn, I want to know. I read every single comment, and your messages from around the world remind me why I love doing this. Now, before we dive in, I need to tell you something. My wife made a bet with me. She said there is no way this channel reaches 1,000 subscribers before the end of January. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Give up on that dream." But I smiled at her and said, "You do not know my family. You do not know the incredible community that shows up every single day, that comments, that shares, that supports this channel. So here is my challenge to you. Prove her wrong. If you have not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who loves historical romance and emotional stories. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Let us make January the month the Duke's Revenge family proved everyone wrong. Now, let me take you to London. The year is 1843. The rain is hammering the cobblestones. A duchess sits in her carriage, wealthy beyond measure, powerful beyond question, and completely, utterly alone. Her husband died 3 years ago. They never had children. Society whispers that she was barren, that she failed in her one duty as a wife. She has accepted this as her shame, carried it like a stone in her chest for 3 long years. But everything she believes about her marriage, about herself, about the man she loved, is about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Because in 5 minutes, she will stop her carriage for a beggar boy. And what she discovers will make her tear apart every lie her husband ever told, and burn down anyone who tries to take those children from her. This is a story about betrayal, about secrets that outlive the men who keep them, about a woman who thought she knew her husband and discovered she never knew him at all. But more than anything, this is a story about love, the kind that finds you when you least expect it, in the faces of children who are not yours by blood, but become yours by choice. Let me take you there now, to a rain-soaked London street, to the moment everything changed. The sky had turned the color of wet slate by late afternoon, and the rain fell in sheets so thick that the gas lamps along Mayfair seemed to float in a gray void, their light swallowed by the downpour before it could reach the ground. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that vibrated through the cobblestones and up through the wheels of the carriage. Augustina Ashbury, Dowager Duchess of Ashbury, sat in the velvet-lined interior of her black lacquered carriage, her gloved hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the rain-streaked window. She was not watching the streets. She was not watching anything at all. Her eyes were open, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere 3 years in the past, in a bedroom that smelled of sickness and laudanum, holding the hand of a man who was slipping away from her. She was 34 years old. She had been married for 10 years and widowed for 3. She had buried her husband, her hopes, and most of her heart in the family crypt at Ashbury Park. And she had spent every day since then learning how to exist in a world that no longer made sense. The carriage jolted slightly as it slowed, and her coachman's voice came muffled through the rain. "Your Grace, the traffic ahead is quite thick. Shall I take the lane through Whitmore Street? It may add 20 minutes, but we shall avoid the worst of it." Augustina did not answer immediately. She was still staring at nothing, her reflection a ghost in the glass. "Your Grace?" She blinked and sat up straighter. "Whitmore Street is fine, Carrick. I am in no hurry." There was nowhere she needed to be. There was no one waiting for her. The solicitor's meeting she had just left had been tedious. Discussions of investments and property yields and quarterly reports that meant nothing to a woman who had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes and no one to spend it on. The carriage turned, and the rain seemed to fall even harder, drumming against the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Augustina pulled her cashmere shawl tighter around her shoulders and returned her gaze to the window. And then she saw him. At first, she thought it was a bundle of rags, a heap of discarded cloth left against the iron railing of a churchyard, dark and shapeless in the storm. But then the bundle moved, and she saw arms, thin, pale arms, wrapped around something pressed to a narrow chest. No, not something. Someone. 2 someones. Augustina leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. Through the rain she could make out the shape of a boy, 12, perhaps 13 years old, standing in the gap between 2 buildings, where the overhang provided almost no shelter at all. His clothes were soaked through, plastered to his skeletal frame. His hair hung in dark ropes across his forehead, and in his arms, clutched so tightly that his knuckles had gone white, were 2 small bundles wrapped in what looked like flour sacks. Babies. He was holding babies. One of the infants lifted its face toward the sky, mouth open, crying without sound. Or perhaps the sound was simply swallowed by the thunder. And even through the rain, even through the smeared glass of the carriage window, Augustina saw something that made her heart stop. The baby's eyes. They were open. They were looking toward the street. And they were the color of amber, that rare golden brown that caught the light like honey held up to the sun. A color she had seen only twice in her entire life. Once in a portrait of her husband's grandmother that hung in the gallery at Ashbury Park, and once every single day for 10 years, looking back at her from her husband's face. Godwin's eyes. Augustina's hand moved before her mind could catch up. She rapped on the roof of the carriage, sharp and urgent. "Stop the carriage!" Carrick's voice came back, confused. "Your Grace?" "Stop the carriage now." The wheels groaned as the horses were reined in. The carriage lurched to a halt, and Augustina was already reaching for the door handle. "Your Grace! The rain! Your dress!" But she wasn't listening. She pushed the door open and stepped down into the storm, her silk slippers immediately soaking through as they hit the flooded cobblestones. Rain struck her face, her hair, the expensive emerald gown that had cost more than most families earned in a year. She did not care. She walked toward the boy. He saw her coming and flinched backward, pressing himself against the wall, his arms tightening around the babies. His eyes were wild with fear, the eyes of an animal that expected to be kicked. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible above the rain. "Please, we are not causing trouble. We will move. We will go." Augustina stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see how thin he was, his cheekbones sharp as knives beneath his skin, his wrists like sticks where they emerged from his ragged sleeves. The babies in his arms were quieter now, perhaps too weak to cry, their tiny faces pale and pinched, and their eyes, both of them, that same amber gold. "Who are you?" Augustina asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The boy swallowed. "Tobias, ma'am." "My name is Tobias." "And those children, who are they?" He looked down at the babies, then back at her. Rain ran down his face like tears. They are mine. Yours? My daughters. Augustina stared at him. He could not be more than 13. The babies could not be more than 7 or 8 months old. The mathematics was impossible, and yet the way he held them, not like a burden, but like a treasure, told her something else was true. You are lying, she said quietly. Not about loving them, but about being their father. The boy's face crumpled for just a moment before he forced it back into blankness. Please, ma'am. We will leave. We don't want trouble. Augustina took another step closer. The rain was soaking through her gown now, cold against her skin, but she barely noticed. All she could see were those eyes. All she could hear was her husband's voice, 3 years dead, telling her it wasn't her fault they had no children, telling her that some couples simply were not blessed, telling her that they would be happy anyway, just the two of them, and that was enough. Where is their mother? She asked. Tobias's face changed. Something raw and wounded flickered across it. Dead, he said. She died when they were born. And their father, their real father. He did not answer. He just looked at her with those exhausted, ancient eyes, and in his silence, Augustina heard everything. She turned to Carrick, who had followed her with an umbrella and was standing a few feet behind her, looking horrified. Bring them to the carriage, she said. Your Grace? You heard me. All 3 of them. Bring them to the carriage now. Carrick opened his mouth to protest, then saw something in her face that made him close it again. He stepped forward and reached for one of the babies. Tobias jerked backward. No. No, please. Do not take them. Please. Augustina raised her hand, and her voice softened. We are not taking them from you. You are coming with us. The boy stared at her. Where? Somewhere dry. Somewhere safe. Somewhere these babies will not die of cold before morning. Tobias did not move. His eyes searched her face, looking for the lie, the trap, the cruelty that he had clearly learned to expect from the world. I am not going to hurt you, Augustina said. I promise. It was a strange thing to say. A duchess in the rain, promising a street child that she meant no harm. But something in the words, or perhaps something in the way she said, them, made Tobias's shoulders drop slightly. Why? He asked. Why would you help us? Augustina looked at the babies, at those amber eyes, now closed, tiny chests rising and falling with shallow, frightening breaths. Because I think I know who you are, she said quietly. And if I am right, then you belong with me. She turned and walked back toward the carriage. After a long moment, she heard footsteps splashing through the puddles behind her. Tobias was following. What Augustina did not know, what she could not have known, was that she was being watched. Across the street, sheltered beneath the awning of a gentleman's club, a man stood frozen in place. He had been about to step into his own carriage when he saw her emerge from hers, saw her walk into the rain without hesitation, saw her kneel before a beggar boy, and speak to him with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a woman of her station. His name was Lord Marcus Fairfax, Earl of Dunmore. He was 38 years old, a widower of 7 years, and he had been quietly, hopelessly in love with Augustina Ashbury since the first moment he saw her at a ball 15 years ago. She had been newly married then, radiant on the arm of her duke, and Marcus had known immediately that she was beyond his reach. So he had buried his feelings, married a kind woman he respected, but never truly loved, and watched from a distance as Augustina's life unfolded. The childless years, the whispered pity, the husband's death, the widow's grief. He had wanted to go to her. 1,000 times. He had wanted to cross the ballroom, the drawing room, the church, and tell her that she deserved more than pity, that she was extraordinary, that her worth had nothing to do with whether she bore children. But he never had, because it was not his place, because she was grieving, because he was a coward. Now he stood in the rain, watching her help a street boy into her carriage, and he felt something shift in his chest. This was who she truly was. Not the cold, untouchable Duchess that society saw, but a woman of fierce compassion, of reckless kindness, of a heart so large it could embrace strangers in the rain. And Marcus knew, with sudden certainty, that he could not watch from a distance any longer. Whatever was happening in her life, whatever had driven her to stop for that boy, he was going to find out. And he was going to help, whether she wanted him to or not. Now, it is important to understand what we are witnessing here. In 1843 England, a woman in Augustina's position was both powerful and powerless in ways that might seem contradictory to us today. As a dowager duchess, she held one of the highest ranks a woman could achieve in English society. She had wealth, property, and a title that commanded respect wherever she went. Servants bowed, shopkeepers trembled. Her name alone could open doors that remained firmly shut to almost everyone else. But she was also a widow without children, and in the eyes of the law, that made her something very close to a failure. You see, the entire purpose of an aristocratic marriage, in the eyes of 1840s society, was the production of heirs. A wife existed to continue her husband's bloodline, to ensure that titles and estates passed smoothly from one generation to the next. A woman who could not, or did not, fulfill this duty was viewed with a mixture of pity and suspicion. For 3 years, Augustina had endured the whispers. Barren, they called her. Defective, a beautiful vessel that could not hold what it was meant to carry. She had visited doctors, submitted to humiliating examinations, drunk foul-tasting tonics, and prayed until her knees ached on the cold stone floors of the Ashbury chapel. Nothing had worked, and Godwin, her husband, had held her hand through all of it and told her that it did not matter, that he loved her anyway, that they would find happiness without children. She had believed him. She had believed every word. Inside the carriage, the world was warm and quiet. The rain still hammered against the roof, but in here, wrapped in cashmere and velvet, it sounded almost peaceful. Augustina sat on one side, Tobias sat on the other, as far from her as the space would allow, the babies cradled in his lap. He had refused to let Carrick touch them, had carried them into the carriage himself with a strength that seemed impossible for his thin frame. Now he sat rigid, his eyes darting around the interior, the brass fittings, the silk curtains, the small oil lamp that cast a golden glow over everything. He looked like someone who had wandered into a dream and was waiting to wake up. Augustina studied him in silence. Up close, she could see more details, the sharp line of his jaw, already beginning to show the ghost of the man he would become, the intelligence in his eyes, dulled by exhaustion but still present, the way his hands never stopped moving over the babies, checking their breathing, adjusting their wrappings, soothing them with touches so gentle they were almost invisible. "How long have you been on the streets?" she asked. He did not look at her. "Since they were born." 7 months. "And before that?" "We lived with a woman near the church. She let us stay in her back room while she was carrying them. But when my mother died, she said she could not keep us anymore." Augustina felt a twist in her chest. "Your mother died in childbirth?" He nodded. And there was no one else? No family? No, ma'am. It was just us. Just me and my mother. And then me and them. Augustina looked at the babies. They were sleeping now, or perhaps simply too weak to stay awake. Their faces were pale, their lips slightly blue. They needed food. They needed warmth. They needed a physician. Their names, she said. What are their names? For the first time, something close to a smile crossed Tobias's face. Clara and Celia. My mother named them before she said they were like 2 stars. Like 2 little lights. Clara and Celia. Pretty names. Gentle names. The kind of names a schoolteacher might choose. Your mother, Augustina said carefully. What was her name? Tobias's face changed. The wariness returned, sharper than before. Why do you want to know? Because I think I may have known her. Or known of her. He was quiet in the silence that followed. The carriage swayed gently as it turned a corner. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease. Mercy, he said finally. Her name was Mercy. Mercy Adwell. Augustina repeated the name in her mind. Mercy Adwell. She had never heard it before. But then, why would she have? If Godwin had kept this woman's secret for years, he would not have been careless enough to let her name slip. She was a teacher, Tobias continued, his voice soft, in a village called Hartwell, near a big house on a hill. Augustina's breath caught. Hartwell was less than 3 miles from Ashbury Park. She taught the village children, Tobias said, reading and writing and sums. Everyone loved her. She was... He stopped, swallowed hard. She was the kindest person I ever knew. And your father? Tobias's face closed like a door slamming shut. I do not have a father. Everyone has a father, Tobias. Not me. His voice was hard now, brittle. The man who helped make me never wanted me. My mother told me that. She said he had another life, another family, and there was no room in it for us. Augustina felt the words like a physical blow. Another life, another family. Did you ever meet him? She asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Tobias shrugged. Sometimes. He would come to visit, bring money, presents. He never stayed long. And he trailed off. Never what? Never looked at me like I was his. He looked at me like I was a secret he wished he could forget. The carriage had stopped. They had arrived at Ashbury House, the London residence that Augustina maintained for the season. Through the window, she could see the grand facade, the marble columns, the footmen already rushing out with umbrellas. But she did not move. She sat very still, looking at this boy who did not know who she was, who did not understand what he had just told her. Tobias, she said quietly, the man who visited your mother. Did he have unusual eyes? The boy frowned. What? His eyes? What color were they? Tobias was silent for a moment. Then he looked down at the babies in his lap. Like theirs, he said. Like honey in sunlight. My mother said it was the only beautiful thing he ever gave us. Augustina closed her eyes. The world seemed to tilt around her. Everything she had believed for 10 years crumbling like a sandcastle before the tide. Godwin had lied. He had lied about everything. He had not been unable to have children. He had simply chosen to have them with someone else. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Augustina issued orders with a calm precision that surprised even herself. Her voice steady, even as her heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. The babies were taken to the warmest room in the house. A fire was built up until the air shimmered with heat. The physician, Dr. Hartley, was summoned from his home 3 streets away and arrived within the hour, his bag clutched in his hand, and his face creased with confusion at being called to treat what he was told were unexpected guests. Tobias refused to leave the baby's side. He sat in a chair by the fire, wrapped in a blanket one of the maids had pressed upon him, watching every move the doctor made with the fierce attention of a hawk guarding its nest. "They are malnourished," Dr. Hartley announced after his examination, his voice carefully neutral. "Severely so, and there are signs of early chest congestion from the cold. But they are fighters, these two. With proper food, warmth, and care, they should recover fully." "Whatever they need," Augustina said. "Spare no expense." The doctor nodded, then hesitated. "Your Grace, if I may ask, who are these children? There will be questions. The parish, the authorities." "These children are my responsibility," Augustina said firmly. "That is all anyone needs to know for now." After the doctor left, Augustina ordered a bath drawn for Tobias and fresh clothes brought from the servants' stores. He resisted at first, unwilling to leave the babies even for a moment. But Augustina promised to stay with them herself, and something in her face must have convinced him, because he finally allowed himself to be led away. Alone with the sleeping infants, Augustina stood over their cradle, a beautiful thing of carved oak and white lace that had been in the Ashbury family for generations, originally purchased for children that never came, and looked down at them. Clara and Celia, two tiny girls with rosebud mouths and downy dark hair, and those eyes, those impossible amber eyes that were her husband's eyes, her dead husband's eyes, staring up at the ceiling in innocent sleep. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Who are you, really?" But she already knew. She had known from the moment she saw them through the rain-streaked window of her carriage. She had known, and she had not wanted to know, and now the knowing was inside her like a splinter of glass, working its way toward her heart. She needed proof. Not for herself, she was already certain, but for what was to come. Because she knew, with the instinct of a woman who had spent 10 years navigating the treacherous waters of aristocratic society, that this was only the beginning. When Godwin's family learned about these children, and they would learn, they always learned, there would be war. That night, after the children were fed and sleeping peacefully, after Tobias had been settled in a bedroom down the hall with strict instructions to rest, Augustina went to a room she had not entered in 3 years. Godwin's study. The door was locked, as it had been since his death. She had ordered it sealed, unable to face the sight of his desk, his books, the comfortable leather chair where he used to sit and read to her on winter evenings. She had told herself she was preserving his memory. Now she wondered if some part of her had always known there were secrets she was not ready to find. The key turned with a soft click. The door swung open, releasing a smell of dust and old paper and something else. The ghost of his cologne, still clinging to the curtains after all this time. Augustina stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The room was exactly as he had left it. Papers still stacked on the desk. A half-empty glass of brandy sitting on the side table, its contents long since evaporated into a dark stain at the bottom. His reading spectacles, folded neatly beside a book he would never finish. She began to search. She went through the desk drawers first, finding nothing but ordinary correspondence. Letters from solicitors, invitations to events long past, notes about estate management. Then the cabinets, filled with ledgers and account books. Then the bookshelves, pulling volumes out one by one and shaking them for hidden papers. Nothing. She was about to give up when her hand brushed against something behind a row of encyclopedias on the highest shelf. Something that did not feel like leather or paper. Something wooden. She pulled it out. A small box carved from dark oak with a brass clasp that was not locked. Her hands were trembling as she opened it. Inside, she found letters, a thick stack of them, tied with a pale blue ribbon that had faded with age. And on top of the letters, a small portrait, a miniature, the kind that could be hidden in a pocket and carried close to the heart. Augustina held the portrait up to the candlelight. A woman looked back at her. Young, perhaps 25 when this was painted. Dark hair pulled back from a gentle face, kind eyes, warm and soft, and a smile that spoke of quiet happiness, of simple pleasures, of a life lived without pretense. Mercy Adwell. It had to be. Augustina set the portrait aside and untied the ribbon around the letters. Her hands were steady now, her shock crystallizing into something harder and colder. She began to read. My dearest Godwin, thank you for coming last weekend. Tobias was so happy to see you. He asked me this morning when you would return, and I told him soon. I always tell him soon. I hope I am not lying. I understand that your life is complicated. I have always understood. You have your duties, your position, your other responsibilities. I do not ask you to abandon them. I only ask that when you are here, with us, you are truly here. That you see Tobias not as an obligation but as what he is, your son. A boy who loves you even when you are not there to see it. I know you cannot give him your name. I have accepted that. But please, Godwin, give him your time when you can. That is all I ask. With all my love, Mercy. Augustina read that letter, and then the next, and then the next, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. The letters spanned years, more than a decade of correspondence, of secret meetings, of a love affair conducted in shadows, while she sat at home in Ashbury Park, believing herself the center of her husband's world. Some of the letters were simple, updates about Tobias's health, his progress in school, the small triumphs of childhood that Godwin had missed. Others were more painful, pleas for him to visit more often, reassurances that Mercy understood why he could not, expressions of love that were heartbreaking in their resigned acceptance. And then, near the bottom of the stack, a letter dated just over a year before Godwin's death. My dearest Godwin, I must tell you something, and I do not know how you will receive it. I am with child again. The physician says it will be twins. I know what you are thinking. I know this complicates everything. But please understand. I did not plan this. I did not ask for it. And yet now that it is happening, I cannot bring myself to wish it away. I am 32 years old. Tobias is 12. I had believed my time for bearing children was past. But God, it seems, had other plans. I do not ask you to acknowledge them any more than you have acknowledged Tobias. I do not ask you to leave your wife or abandon your position. I ask only that you know they exist, that somewhere in the world you have children who carry your blood, even if they will never carry your name. Please come when you can. I would like to see your face when you learn you are to be a father again. With all my love, always, Mercy. Augustina set the letter down. Her hands were shaking again, but not from cold. A year before his death. He had known about the twins for a year, and he had never said a word. He had sat across from her at breakfast, walked with her in the gardens, held her in his arms at night, and never once let slip that another woman was carrying his children. And all that time, while Mercy grew heavy with twins she would not survive delivering, while Augustina prayed and wept and blamed herself for their empty nursery, Godwin had known exactly why they had no children. Because he had chosen to give them to someone else. One more letter remained. This one was different from the others, written on cheaper paper, the handwriting less elegant, clearly composed in haste. Your Grace, I do not know if you will ever read this. I do not know if anyone will ever find it among Mr. Godwin's things, but I must try. My name is Martha Cullen. I was Miss Mercy Adwell's neighbor and friend. I am writing to tell you that she passed away 3 days ago, giving birth to twin daughters. The babies survived, but they are weak. Tobias is caring for them as best he can, but he is only a child himself. I do not know what arrangements Mr. Godwin made for them. He visited once, 2 months before his death, and told Mercy he would make provisions. But nothing has come. No money, no letters, no help of any kind. Mercy never told anyone who the children's father was. She kept your family's secret to the very end. But I knew. I saw Mr. Godwin's carriage. I saw his eyes in Tobias's face, and now in the twins' faces too. If you are reading this, I beg you, please help them. They are innocent. They did not ask to be born in secret. They do not deserve to suffer for the sins of their parents. Please. With desperate hope, Martha Cullen. The letter was dated 8 months ago. 8 months. It had been sitting here, in this box, in this locked room, for 8 months, while Tobias struggled to keep his sisters alive on the streets of London. Godwin had died before he could make provisions. Or perhaps he had never intended to. Perhaps the promises he made to Mercy were just more lies, more pretty words designed to keep her quiet and compliant, while he lived his real life elsewhere. Augustina stood up slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, her head light. But beneath the shock and the grief and the rage, something else was forming. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. These children were her husband's blood. They were the heirs he had denied her, the family she had prayed for, the proof that she had never been barren at all. And she was going to claim them. Not because she owed Godwin anything. She owed him nothing but contempt. But because Tobias and Clara and Celia were innocent. Because they had suffered enough. And because, looking at them, she saw something she had not expected to see. She saw herself, alone, abandoned, carrying burdens that should never have been hers. She was going to save them. And God help anyone who tried to stop her. The next morning, Augustina summoned her solicitor. She had expected Mr. Hargrave, the thin, elderly man who had handled her husband's affairs for years. But the man who walked into her study was not Mr. Hargrave at all. He was tall, broad-shouldered, perhaps 35 years of age, with dark hair silvered at the temples, and a face that might have been carved from granite. All sharp angles and hard lines, as if he had long ago decided that softness was a luxury he could not afford. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they assessed her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly, inexplicably, aware of her own heartbeat. "Your Grace," he said, bowing. His voice was deep, controlled, revealing nothing. "I am Lord Marcus Hargrave. My father retired last month due to ill health. I have taken over his practice." Augustina blinked. "Lord?" "Earl of Ashford," he said, as if the title meant nothing to him. "A courtesy I rarely use. In the courtroom, I prefer to be judged on my arguments rather than my bloodline." She studied him for a moment. An earl who practiced law was unusual. Aristocrats typically viewed such work as beneath them. There was a story there, she sensed, a reason why a man of his standing would choose to spend his days in dusty courtrooms rather than the gilded halls of Parliament. "Please sit, Lord Hargrave. We have much to discuss." He sat in the chair across from her desk, and she noticed the way he moved, controlled, economical, as if every gesture had been considered and measured. His hands were large, his fingers long. They rested on the arms of the chair with perfect stillness. She told him everything, the children she had found, the letters she had discovered, the truth about her husband's secret family. Most men would have interrupted. Most men would have offered opinions, asked unnecessary questions, tried to take control of the conversation. Hargrave did none of these things. He simply listened, his gray eyes fixed on her face, his expression revealing nothing. When she finished, he was silent several heartbeats past before. "This is an extraordinary situation, Your Grace," he said finally. "I am aware. The implications are significant. If these children are indeed the late Duke's natural offspring, they may have claims to—" "They have claims to nothing," Augustina interrupted. "They are illegitimate. English law is quite clear on that point. They cannot inherit the title or the entailed estates." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. Most clients needed such things explained to them. She had already done the research herself. "That is true, Your Grace. But the unentailed property, the investments, the London properties, your personal fortune, those are a different matter." Augustina nodded. "Which is why I want you to draw up papers. I want legal guardianship of all 3 children. I want them recognized as my wards, and I want my will updated to name them as my beneficiaries." Hargrave's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his careful composure. "Your Grace, are you certain? There will be opposition. Lord Osric can go to the devil." For the briefest moment, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then it was gone, replaced by professional neutrality. "Draw up the papers," Augustina repeated. "I want them ready by the end of the week." "Yes, Your Grace." He stood and gathered his things. At the door, he paused and turned back to look at her. His gray eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "If I may say so, Your Grace, most people in your position would have turned those children away. They would have seen them as a reminder of betrayal, a source of shame. You saw them as something worth fighting for." She met his gaze steadily. "They are children, Lord Hargrave. They did not choose to be born. They did not choose to be abandoned. The only shame here belongs to the people who failed them." He nodded slowly. "Then I shall be honored to represent you in this matter. And I should warn you, I do not lose cases." "Good," Augustina said, "because I do not intend to be your first." After he left, she stood at the window in the stillness, watching his carriage pull away. There was something about the man that unsettled her, not in an unpleasant way, but in the way a stone unsettles still water, sending ripples in every direction. She shook her head. She had no time for such thoughts. There was a battle to prepare for, and she intended to win it. She told him everything. The children she had found, the letters she had discovered, the truth about her husband's secret family. Hargrave listened without interrupting, his face growing progressively more grave. When she finished, he was silent after a pause. "This is an extraordinary situation, Your Grace," he said finally. "I am aware. The implications are significant. If these children are indeed the late Duke's natural offspring, they may have claims to—" "They have claims to nothing," Augustina interrupted. "They are illegitimate. English law is quite clear on that point. They cannot inherit the title or the entailed estates." "That is true, Your Grace. But the unentailed property, the investments, the London properties, Your Grace's personal fortune, those are a different matter." Augustina nodded. "Which is why I want you to draw up papers. I want legal guardianship of all 3 children. I want them recognized as my wards, and I want my will updated to name them as my beneficiaries." Hargrave's eyebrows rose. Your Grace, are you certain? There will be opposition. Lord Osric can go to the devil. The solicitor blinked at her language but did not comment. Draw up the papers, Augustina repeated. I want them ready by the end of the week. Yes, Your Grace. Hargrave stood and gathered his things. At the door, he paused. If I may offer a word of caution, Your Grace, the late Duke's family will not accept this quietly. Lord Osric has been waiting 3 years for you to either remarry or die, so that he can claim the title. When he learns that you have taken in children with a potential claim to the unentailed assets. Let him come, Augustina said. I have spent 3 years being pitied and whispered about. I have spent 3 years believing I was broken. Now I discover that my husband was the one who was broken. Broken in his honor, his honesty, his basic decency as a human being. She met Hargrave's eyes. I am done being the victim of his choices. From now on, I make my own. The solicitor nodded slowly. Then I shall prepare for war, Your Grace. Do that, Mr. Hargrave. Do exactly that. The next few weeks were a revelation. The twins, properly fed and cared for, transformed almost overnight. Their cheeks filled out, their skin lost its grayish pallor, and their personalities emerged like flowers opening to the sun. Clara was the serious one, her amber eyes watchful and thoughtful, studying everything around her with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child of 8 months. Celia was the laugher, constantly babbling and reaching for anyone who came near, her smile so bright it could light a room. Tobias transformed too, though more slowly. The first few days, he walked through Ashbury House like a ghost, flinching at sudden sounds, apologizing for existing, unable to believe that the food and warmth and safety were real. He kept waiting for the catch, the trap, the moment when it would all be snatched away. But that moment never came. And gradually, incrementally, he began to relax. Augustina hired a tutor for him, a patient, gentle man named Mr. Clemens, who specialized in educating boys who had fallen behind their peers. Tobias had learned to read from his mother, but his education had been spotty at best, and there were enormous gaps in his knowledge. He threw himself into learning with a ferocity that surprised everyone, staying up late with his books, asking endless questions, determined to catch up to boys his own age. He is remarkable, Mr. Clemens told Augustina after the first week. His mind is sharp, his memory excellent. With proper instruction, he could be ready for Eton in 2 years. Augustina smiled. Then give him proper instruction? She found herself spending more time with the children than she had expected. At first, it was simply supervision, making sure they were fed, clothed, cared for. But gradually, it became something more. She read stories to the twins before bed. She sat with Tobias during his lessons, asking questions about what he was learning. She took meals with them in the nursery instead of alone in the formal dining room. The house, which had been silent and empty for 3 years, filled with noise. Baby laughter. Tobias's voice reciting Latin conjugations, the patter of small feet running down corridors, music from the pianoforte, which Augustina played for the first time since Godwin's death. It was not what she had imagined. It was not the family she had dreamed of during those long, desperate years of trying and failing to conceive. But it was real. And it was hers. Or at least it was, until Lord Osric arrived. He came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after Augustina had taken in the children. She was in the nursery, helping Tobias practice his penmanship, when the butler appeared in the doorway, with a face like curdled milk. Your Grace, Lord Osric Ashbury is here. He insists on seeing you immediately. Augustina set down her pen. She had known this was coming. Hargrave had warned her that word would spread, that servants gossiped, that nothing stayed secret in London for long. But she had hoped for more time. "Tell him I will be down in 10 minutes. He is already in the drawing room, Your Grace. He let himself in." Of course he did. Osric had never understood the concept of boundaries. Augustina turned to Tobias. "Stay here with your sisters. Don't come downstairs, no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" Tobias's face was pale, but he nodded. Is he going to take us away?" "No." Augustina's voice was firm. "No one is taking you anywhere. I promise." She smoothed her dress, straightened her spine, and walked downstairs to face her husband's brother. Lord Osric Ashbury was a large man, not fat, but broad, with the kind of physical presence that seemed to fill whatever room he entered. He had the Ashbury coloring, dark hair, strong jaw, those distinctive amber eyes. But where Godwin had been handsome in a refined, aristocratic way, Osric was simply imposing. His features were heavier, his expressions coarser, his manner loud and domineering. He was standing in the middle of her drawing room when she entered, his coat still on, his hat still in his hand, his face mottled with barely contained rage. "Augustina," he said, not bothering with formalities. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" "Good afternoon, Osric," she replied calmly. "I see you have dispensed with pleasantries. How refreshing. Do not play games with me." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I have heard the rumors. The whole of London has heard the rumors. You have taken in street children. Bastards. And you are claiming they belong to my brother." "I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating facts. Would you like to see the evidence?" "Evidence?" He laughed harshly. "What evidence? The word of some beggar boy? The lies of some dead village whore?" Augustina's hand moved before she could stop it. The crack of her palm against his cheek echoed through the room. Osric stared at her, stunned. Her name, Augustina said quietly, was Mercy Adwell. She was a school teacher. She raised Godwin's son alone for 13 years. She died giving birth to his daughters. And if you ever speak of her that way again in my presence, I will have you thrown out of this house and barred from every door in London. Do you understand me?" For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Osric smiled, an ugly, knowing smile. "So it is true. Godwin had a bastard family. All those years of you crying about wanting children, and he was breeding them with some country mouse 3 miles from your bedroom." He laughed. "Oh, this is priceless. The great Duchess of Ashbury, cuckolded by her own husband. Get out. I am not finished." The humor drained from his face. "These children have no claim to anything. They are illegitimate. The law is clear. And if you think I am going to stand by while you hand over Ashbury money to your husband's bastards, the entailed estate goes to you," Augustina interrupted. "The title goes to you. I have never contested that. But the unentailed property, the investments, the London houses, my personal fortune, that is mine to dispose of as I see fit. Not if you are declared unfit to manage your own affairs." Augustina went very still. "What did you say?" Osric's smile returned. "I have already spoken with my solicitors. A woman who takes in street children and claims they belong to her dead husband. A woman who spends money on bastards instead of her own family. A woman who is clearly suffering from grief-induced hysteria. Such a woman might need assistance in managing her affairs. You would not dare. Try me." He picked up his hat and moved toward the door. "You have 1 week to send those children back to whatever gutter you found them in. If you do not, I will drag you through every court in England. I will have you declared incompetent. I will take everything." He paused at the threshold. This is not a threat, Augustina. It is a promise." And then he was gone. Now, I need to pause here and explain something that many of you might not know. In 1843 England, women had very few legal rights, especially when it came to property and money. Under the laws of coverture, which would not be significantly reformed until the Married Women's Property Acts of the 1870s and 80s, a married woman essentially ceased to exist as a legal person. Her property became her husband's property. Her earnings became his earnings. She could not sign contracts, could not sue or be sued, could not control her own financial destiny. Widows had slightly more freedom. They could own property, make wills, control their own finances, but they were still vulnerable in ways that men were not. A woman could be declared mentally incompetent by a court of law, and if that happened, a male relative could be appointed to manage her affairs. This was the threat Osric was making, not an empty one. Courts had sided with families before. Judges had declared women hysterical, irrational, unfit, simply for making choices that their male relatives did not approve of. Augustina was powerful, but she was not invincible, and Osric knew it. That night, after the children were asleep, Augustina sat alone in her study with a glass of brandy she did not drink and a fire she did not feel. She was thinking. Osric was a bully, but he was not stupid. He would not have made that threat unless he believed he could carry it out. That meant he had allies, judges who owed him favors, doctors who could be bought, society matrons who would testify that the Duchess had always been a bit odd. She needed allies of her own. She pulled a sheet of paper toward her and began to write. The first letter went to Lady Catherine Wentworth, a widow whose husband had left her in a similar situation 15 years ago, and who had successfully fought off attempts by her brothers-in-law to steal her fortune. They had met at a charity event 2 years ago and discovered they had much in common. The second letter went to Dr. Edmund Price, a physician who had treated her for years and who could testify to her mental soundness. The third letter went to the editor of the London Chronicle, a man who owed her a favor after she had provided him with information about a corrupt politician 5 years ago. The fourth letter went to her banker, instructing him to move certain assets into accounts that Osric could not touch. And the fifth letter went to a man named Mr. Thomas Kellaway, a private investigator who specialized in finding information that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. If Osric wanted war, she would give him war, but she would fight it on her own terms, with weapons he did not expect. The next few weeks were a siege. Osric filed his petition with the Court of Chancery, claiming that Augustina was suffering from melancholic delusions and was unfit to manage her considerable estate. He produced 3 doctors, none of whom had ever examined her, who were willing to testify that her behavior showed signs of feminine hysteria and grief-induced mania. Augustina responded with her own doctors, her own solicitors, and her own army of witnesses. Lady Catherine Wentworth spoke publicly about how the Ashbury family was attempting to steal a widow's property. The London Chronicle published a scathing article about the treatment of women in the English legal system, using Augustina's case as an example. Public opinion began to shift. What had started as gossip about a duchess who had lost her mind became a debate about justice, about the rights of women, about the cruelty of a system that allowed men to control women's lives and fortunes. But Augustina knew that public opinion would not be enough. She needed proof that she was not delusional, that the children were truly Godwin's, that her decision to take them in was rational and justified. She needed the investigation to be complete. Mr. Kellaway arrived at Ashbury House on a gray morning in late November, his report tucked under his arm. He was a nondescript man, the kind of man you would pass on the street without noticing, which was precisely what made him good at his job. "Your Grace," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I have completed my investigation into the late Duke's activities during the years in question." And he opened the report. The Duke maintained a cottage in the village of Hartwell, approximately 3 miles from Ashbury Park. The cottage was registered under a false name and paid for through a series of anonymous bank transfers. He visited regularly, approximately once a month, for a period of at least 14 years. Augustina nodded. She had expected as much. Miss Mercy Adwell lived in that cottage from 1829 until her death last year. Her son Tobias was born in 1830, when she was 19 years old. The birth wasn't registered with any father's name, but neighbors confirmed that the Duke was a regular visitor and was understood to be the child's father. What about the twins? Born last January, Miss Adwell died in childbirth, attended by a local midwife named Mrs. Harper. The midwife confirms that the Duke visited approximately 2 months before his death. That would have been during Miss Adwell's pregnancy, and appeared distressed about the situation. Distressed? According to Mrs. Harper, he spoke of making provisions for the children, but seemed uncertain how to proceed without revealing his secret to his wife. Kellaway paused. "That would be you, Your Grace." Augustina's jaw tightened. "Go on." After the Duke's death, no provisions arrived. Miss Adwell's neighbor, a Mrs. Martha Cullen, wrote a letter to Ashbury Park, hoping to reach the Duke's family, but received no response. That letter was found among the Duke's private papers, apparently never opened. Because Godwin was dead by then, Augustina thought. And whoever collected his correspondence, probably his secretary, had simply filed it away without reading it. The boy, Tobias, attempted to care for his sisters alone, Kellaway continued. He sold what little furniture remained in the cottage, took odd jobs in the village, and eventually left Hartwell when the money ran out. He has been living on the streets of London for approximately 7 months, moving from parish to parish to avoid the workhouse authorities, who would have separated him from the infants. 7 months. A 13-year-old boy, keeping 2 babies alive through a London winter, through rain and cold and hunger, because he refused to let them be taken away. Augustina felt something in her chest crack. "Is there anything else?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Kellaway hesitated. "There is one more thing, Your Grace. During my investigation, I discovered that the Duke was not alone in knowing about his second family." "What do you mean?" "Lord Osric knew. He has known for at least 8 years. There are records of payments, hush money essentially, that the Duke made to certain individuals in Hartwell to keep the secret quiet. Lord Osric was present when some of those payments were made. He witnessed them." Augustina sat very still. Lord Osric knew about Mercy Adwell. He knew about Tobias. He almost certainly knew about the twins, and he said nothing. Not to you, not to the authorities, not to anyone. Kellaway closed his report. He let those children starve on the streets of London rather than risk the scandal becoming public. For a long moment, Augustina did not speak. When she did, her voice was cold. "Mr. Kellaway, I want you to prepare a complete dossier of everything you have found. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. I want it ready to present in court. Yes, Your Grace. And I want you to find Mrs. Harper, the midwife, and Mrs. Cullen, the neighbor. I want them brought to London. I will pay their expenses, their lodging, whatever they need. I want them ready to testify. It will be done." Augustina stood and walked to the window. Outside, The sky was heavy with the promise of snow. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Tobias laughing at something. A real laugh. The laugh of a boy who was finally learning what it felt like to be safe. Lord Osric called those children worthless, she said quietly. He called their mother a whore. He has spent 3 weeks trying to have me declared insane so that he can steal my fortune and send them back to the streets. She turned to face Kellaway. I am going to destroy him. Not just defeat him. Destroy him. I want his reputation in tatters. I want his name synonymous with cruelty and cowardice. I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing that he tried to crush 3 innocent children and failed. Kellaway nodded slowly. I believe that can be arranged, Your Grace. Good. Then let us begin. But Osric did not wait for the courtroom. 3 nights before the hearing, Augustina was awakened by screaming. Not the thin, reedy cry of a hungry baby. This was different. Raw, terrified. The scream of a child in mortal danger. Tobias. She was out of bed before she was fully awake, grabbing the iron fire poker from beside the hearth, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor as she ran toward the nursery. The house was in chaos. Servants shouting, doors slamming, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the corridors. She burst through the nursery door and found a scene from a nightmare. 2 men, rough, burly, dressed in dark clothes with scarves covering their faces, were trying to pry Clara from Tobias's arms. The boy was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but he was fighting like a demon, kicking and biting and screaming, refusing to let go of his sister even as one of the men struck him across the face. Celia was screaming in her crib. The nurse lay crumpled in the corner, unconscious or worse. Get away from them! Augustina's voice came out as a roar she did not recognize. She swung the iron rod at the nearest man, catching him across the shoulders with a crack that echoed through the room. He howled and stumbled backward. The second man turned, his face twisted with surprise. It's just the woman. Grab the brats and let's go. Touch them and I will kill you. Augustina's voice was ice. She raised her weapon again, positioning herself between the men and the children. I am the Duchess of Ashbury. Every magistrate in London knows my name. Every constable in this city will hunt you down. You have 5 seconds to leave before my guards arrive. The first man was recovering, rubbing his shoulder, his eyes murderous. The man who paid us said you'd be soft, said you were just some grieving widow who'd fold at the first sign of trouble. Then he does not know me at all. The man lunged. Augustina swung. The iron connected with his temple with a sickening thud, and he dropped like a stone. The second man stared at his fallen companion, then at the Duchess standing over him with blood on her poker and murder in her eyes. Whatever he had been paid, it was not enough for this. He ran, crashing through the window, disappearing into the darkness of the garden below. In the sudden silence, Augustina heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. The guards, finally roused. And then, from behind her, a voice she had never heard before. Mother! She spun around. Tobias was staring at her. Clara clutched to his chest, tears streaming down his face. He was shaking violently, his whole body trembling with shock and terror, and something else. Something that looked like hope. Mother, he whispered again. You came. You saved us. Augustina dropped the poker and fell to her knees beside him. I will always come, she said, her voice breaking. Always. Do you understand me? No one will ever take you from me. No one. She pulled him into her arms, Clara and all, holding them both as tightly as she could. Celia was still screaming in the crib. Augustina reached with one arm and gathered her close too, pressing kisses to her wet cheeks. Shh. Shh. It is over. Mama is here. Mama is here. The word felt strange in her mouth, and then it did not. It felt like the truest thing she had ever said. The guards flooded into the room, followed by servants with candles, their faces pale with shock. The unconscious intruder was dragged away. The nurse was helped to her feet, shaken but unharmed. "Your Grace," the head guard said, his voice horrified. "Your Grace, I am so sorry. We never thought—" "Send for Lord Marcus Fairfax," Augustina said quietly. She was still holding the children, still kneeling on the floor in her nightgown, and she did not care how she looked. "Tell him what has happened. Tell him to come immediately." "At this hour, Your Grace?" "Immediately." Lord Marcus arrived within the hour. He had clearly dressed in haste. His cravat was askew, his hair uncombed, and there was a wild look in his eyes that Augustina had never seen before. He strode into the nursery without waiting to be announced, took one look at the broken window, and the blood on the floor, and the Duchess sitting in a chair with all 3 children in her lap, and his face went white. "My God," he breathed. "Augustina, are you hurt? Are they hurt?" "Tobias has a cut on his head. The physician has already seen to it." She was calm now. That strange, distant calm that comes after terror has passed. "We are all alive. That is what matters." Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her chair. Up close, she could see the fear in his eyes. Real, visceral fear. Not for himself, but for her. "This was Osric," he said flatly. It was not a question. "Almost certainly. But we cannot prove it. We do not need to prove it tonight." He reached out and, very gently, touched her face. His fingers were warm against her cold cheek. "Tonight. We need to ensure it does not happen again. I am posting my own men around this house. I am staying here myself until the hearing. Marcus, I am not asking permission." His voice was rough, almost harsh, but his touch remained gentle. "I have watched you from a distance for so many years, Augustina. Years of telling myself it was not my place, that you did not need me, that I had no right to insert myself into your life. And tonight, you fought off 2 intruders with an iron fire poker while I was across the city, useless, knowing nothing." He shook his head. "I will not be useless again. I will not stand back while you face this alone. So tell me to leave if you must. Tell me my presence is unwelcome. Tell me anything you like. But I am not going anywhere unless you order me to." Augustina stared at him. In 10 years of marriage, Godwin had never looked at her the way Marcus was looking at her now. Like she was precious. Like she was worth protecting. Like he would burn down the world for her if she asked. "Stay," she whispered. Something in his face shifted, relief and something deeper. "Always." Tobias, who had been pretending to sleep, opened one eye and looked at the Earl kneeling beside his mother's chair. "Are you going to marry her?" he asked. Marcus blinked. Augustina felt her cheeks flush. "That," Marcus said carefully, "is a question for another time. Tonight, I am simply going to make sure no one else comes through that window." Tobias nodded seriously. "Good. She needs someone to look after her. She is very brave, but she is also very stubborn." "I had noticed," Marcus said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "I'm sitting right here," Augustina pointed out. "We know," they said in unison. And despite everything, despite the terror and the blood and the broken window and the battle still to come, Augustina felt herself smile. The next morning, Osric received a message. It was delivered by one of Lord Marcus Fairfax's footmen, a large man with shoulders like a blacksmith and a face that suggested he had broken more than a few noses in his time. The message was brief. "Lord Osric, the men you sent last night failed. One of them is currently in custody and has proven most cooperative with the magistrate's questions." I suggest you consider very carefully how you wish to proceed. Fairfax. Osric read the message 3 times. Then he threw it in the fire and poured himself a brandy with shaking hands. This was not how it was supposed to go. The Duchess was supposed to be weak. She was supposed to be alone. She was supposed to crumble at the first sign of pressure. Instead, she had a child who fought like a street brawler, a household that was now fortified like a military encampment, and the Earl of Dunmore, one of the most powerful men in London, sleeping under her roof. But Osric wasn't ready to surrender. He had one weapon left, and he intended to use it. If he could not take the children by force, he would destroy the Duchess in court. The day before the hearing, Osric came to Ashbury House one final time. He was not permitted inside. The guards had their orders. But he caught Tobias in the garden, the boy having slipped out for a moment of fresh air. "So," Osric said, standing at the gate with a sneer on his face, "this is the little gutter rat who thinks he can steal my inheritance." Tobias stood his ground. The cut on his forehead was still healing, a dark scab that would leave a scar. "I am not stealing anything. I never asked for anything." "No? Then why are you here, living in my brother's house, wearing clothes bought with my brother's money, calling yourself part of this family?" Osric's lip curled with disgust. "You are nothing. Your mother was a whore who spread her legs for a married man, and you are the shameful result." Tobias felt the words like a physical blow, but he thought of his mother, her gentle hands, her patient voice, the way she had worked herself to exhaustion to keep him fed and clothed and educated. He thought of Augustina, the fire in her eyes as she swung that poker, the way she had held him afterward and called herself his mother. He did not flinch. He did not look away. "My mother," he said quietly, "was a schoolteacher. She taught children to read. She was kind and good, and she loved me more than anything in the world. She never asked my father for anything except his time, and he gave her nothing but lies and broken promises. She got what she deserved. She deserved better than him." Tobias's voice grew stronger. "And so did the Duchess. My father lied to everyone. He hurt everyone. That is not my fault. That is not my sister's fault. The only person who should be ashamed is him, and people like you who knew the truth and did nothing while we starved." Osric's face went purple with rage. He gripped the iron bars of the gate like he wanted to rip them from their hinges. "Listen to me, you little bastard. Tomorrow I am going to destroy your precious Duchess in that courtroom. I am going to prove she is mentally unfit. I am going to take everything she has, the house, the money, all of it. And when I do, I will personally escort you and those brats to the workhouse. The one in Whitechapel, I think. They have a very high mortality rate for infants there." He smiled, a cruel, cold smile. "Your sisters will be dead within the month, and you will spend the rest of your miserable life knowing it was your fault for daring to reach above your station." Tobias felt ice run through his veins, but he remembered something his mother used to say. Cruelty is just fear wearing a mask. "You are afraid," he said. "You are afraid that you are not good enough to earn what you want to steal. You are afraid that when people see you next to the Duchess, they will know exactly what kind of man you are. A coward who threatens children because he cannot defeat a woman." He stepped closer to the gate, close enough to see the veins bulging in Osric's forehead. "Tomorrow, the whole world will see, and they will see her for what she is, too. Brave and good, and worth 100 of you. She stopped her carriage for us when no one else would. She fought for us when everyone said we were worthless. She loves us." He smiled, not a cruel smile, but a genuine one. You cannot even imagine what that is like, can you? To be loved like that. I almost feel sorry for you." Osric's hand shot through the bars, grabbing for Tobias's collar, but the boy was faster. He stepped back, out of reach, still smiling. "Goodbye, Lord Osric. I will see you in court." He turned and walked back toward the house, his shoulders straight, his head high. Behind him, Osric screamed something incoherent and obscene. Tobias did not look back. When Augustina heard what had happened, her first instinct was fury at Osric for daring to threaten her son, at the guards for letting him get close enough to speak to Tobias at all. But when she saw Tobias's face, calm, steady, almost peaceful, her fury transformed into something else. Pride. "He called my mother a whore," Tobias said. "He threatened to send Clara and Celia to the workhouse to die. He said it would be my fault." "And what did you say?" Tobias met her eyes. "I said you loved us, and that he could not even imagine what that was like." Augustina pulled him into her arms and held him tight. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she whispered. "And so am I." "Mother?" "Yes?" "We are going to win tomorrow, are we not?" Augustina thought of Marcus, drilling their witnesses late into the night. She thought of the evidence they had gathered, the testimonies they had prepared, the trap they had set for Osric. She thought of the judge, a fair man, by all accounts, who hated bullies and loved justice. "Yes," she said firmly, "we are going to win. And Lord Osric is going to regret the day he ever tried to hurt this family." The day of the hearing arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter day where the sun shone hard off fresh snow and the air bit at any exposed skin. The Court of Chancery was housed in Lincoln's Inn, a grand and imposing building that had witnessed centuries of legal battles. Today, it would witness one more. Augustina arrived early, dressed in deep mourning black, a deliberate choice. She was a widow, defending her right to honor her dead husband's children. Let the court see her grief. Let them see her dignity. Tobias wanted to come, but she had forbidden it. "This is not a place for children," she had told him, "but I will tell you everything when it is over." The courtroom was packed. Word had spread that the Dowager Duchess of Ashbury was fighting for custody of her husband's illegitimate children, and the ton had turned out in force to watch the spectacle. Augustina saw Lady Catherine Wentworth in the gallery, her face set with determination. She saw society matrons whispering behind their fans. She saw journalists with notebooks, ready to record every word. And beside her, a solid, reassuring presence, sat Lord Marcus Fairfax. He had insisted on accompanying her, and for once, she had not argued. His presence drew whispers, too. What was the Earl of Dunmore doing at the Duchess's side? But Augustina found she did not care what people said. She cared only that when she looked to her left, he was there. Across the aisle, she saw Osric. He looked confident, smug even. He had no idea what was coming. The judge entered, Lord Chancellor Lyndhurst, a man known for his fairness and his impatience with nonsense. The room rose and then settled. "We are here," the Lord Chancellor began, "to consider the petition of Lord Osric Ashbury, who seeks to have Her Grace, the Dowager Duchess of Ashbury, declared unfit to manage her own affairs. Lord Osric, you may present your case." Osric's solicitor rose. He was a sleek, well-fed man named Blackwell, known for his ruthlessness in the courtroom. "My Lord Chancellor, the facts of this case are simple. The Dowager Duchess has, in recent weeks, taken into her home 3 children of unknown origin. She claims these children are the illegitimate offspring of her late husband, but she has no proof of this claim beyond her own assertions. She has spent considerable sums on their care, and has announced her intention to name them as beneficiaries in her will. He paused for effect. We submit that these actions are evidence of severe mental disturbance. The Duchess is clearly suffering from grief-induced delusions, believing that these random street children are somehow connected to her husband. We ask that she be placed under the protection of her husband's family, specifically Lord Osric, who can ensure that her fortune is managed responsibly until such time as she recovers her faculties. He paused, then added with a poisonous smile. Furthermore, my Lord Chancellor, we must address the matter of the Duchess's companion. He gestured toward Marcus. Lord Fairfax has been observed staying at Ashbury House, sleeping under the same roof as the Duchess. We submit that this is further evidence of her Grace's unstable mental state, a grieving widow who entertains gentlemen callers while claiming to be devoted to her dead husband's memory. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Augustina felt her face flush with humiliation, but before she could respond, Marcus was on his feet. My Lord Chancellor, I must object to this slander in the strongest possible terms. The Lord Chancellor raised an eyebrow. Lord Fairfax, this is highly irregular. As is the accusation, my lord. Marcus's voice was calm, but carried to every corner of the room. I have been staying at Ashbury House because 3 nights ago, 2 men broke into the nursery and attempted to kidnap the children. They assaulted a 13-year-old boy. They terrorized infant girls. And the Duchess, this woman whom Lord Osric calls mentally unstable, fought them off with an iron fire poker while her guards were still running up the stairs. He let that sink in. I am there as a protector, my Lord Chancellor. Nothing more. And I find it revealing that Lord Osric would rather insinuate improper conduct than explain why men were sent to steal children from their beds. The murmur in the courtroom shifted, from scandal to something angrier. Osric's solicitor paled. My Lord Chancellor, we have no knowledge of any. One of the attackers is currently in custody, Marcus continued. He has been most cooperative with the magistrate. I am sure Lord Osric will be interested to know just how cooperative. Osric's face went from red to white in an instant. The Lord Chancellor's eyes were sharp. Is this true, Lord Osric? Do you have knowledge of this attack? No, this is... Osric was sputtering, his composure crumbling. We will address that matter separately, the Lord Chancellor said coldly. For now, let us proceed with the evidence regarding the children's parentage. Mr. Hargrave, you may present your case. Augustina's solicitor rose. My Lord Chancellor, we categorically reject the suggestion that the Duchess is mentally unfit. She is a woman of sound mind, clear judgment, and excellent character. The children in question are not of unknown origin. They are the documented offspring of the late Duke of Ashbury, and we have substantial evidence to prove it. Then present it, the Lord Chancellor said. And so Hargrave did. He presented the letters, every single one, read aloud in open court. The room listened in stunned silence as Godwin's betrayal was laid bare, his secret life exposed in his own handwriting. He presented the testimony of Mrs. Harper, the midwife, who confirmed that the Duke had visited Mercy Adwell during her pregnancy and had spoken of making provisions for the children. He presented the testimony of Mrs. Cullen, the neighbor, who described the Duke's visits over 14 years and identified Tobias from a sketch as the boy she had known since his birth. He presented the report from Mr. Kellaway, detailing the cottage, the payments, the systematic deception. And then, finally, he presented one last piece of evidence. My Lord Chancellor, I would like to call attention to the testimony we have gathered regarding Lord Osric's knowledge of these children. Osric's face went pale. We have documentary evidence that Lord Osric was aware of his brother's second family for at least 8 years. He witnessed payments made to ensure the secret remained hidden. He knew about Tobias. He almost certainly knew about the twins. And when they were left destitute after their mother's death, he did nothing. The room erupted in whispers. The Lord Chancellor banged his gavel. He let 3 children, his own nieces and nephew by blood, starve on the streets of London rather than risk a scandal. And now he has the audacity to stand before this court and call the woman who saved them mentally unfit. Hargrave turned to face Osric directly. Lord Osric is not here out of concern for the Duchess's welfare. He is here because he wants her money. He has been waiting 3 years for her to die so that he can claim the unentailed estates. When she took in these children and named them her heirs, he saw his inheritance slipping away. This entire petition is nothing but greed dressed up as concern. The Lord Chancellor looked at Osric. Lord Osric, do you have anything to say to these allegations? Osric opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face was red. His hands clenched at his sides. He looked like a man watching his world collapse. No, my Lord Chancellor, his solicitor said quickly. We request a recess to consider our position. Request denied. The Lord Chancellor's voice was sharp. I have heard enough. He looked at Augustina. Your Grace, this court finds no evidence whatsoever that you are mentally unfit to manage your own affairs. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into Lord Osric's conduct regarding these children. Knowingly allowing one's own relatives to suffer in destitution may not be a criminal offense, but it is certainly a moral one, and this court takes a dim view of such behavior. He banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The aftermath was everything Augustina could have hoped for. The newspapers reported the case in lurid detail. Lord Osric became a pariah almost overnight. The man who had let his brother's children starve while he plotted to steal their fortune. The man who had sent thugs to kidnap babies from their beds. He was dropped from guest lists, cut from clubs, shunned by society. But for Augustina, the greatest moment came later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet. She was sitting in her private study, staring into the fire, when there was a soft knock at the door. Come in. Marcus entered. He had removed his formal coat and cravat, and in the firelight, he looked younger, softer, less like the formidable Earl, and more like the man she was beginning to know. I thought you might still be awake, he said quietly. I cannot seem to stop my mind from racing. She gestured to the chair across from hers. Sit with me. He sat, but instead of leaning back, he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes on her face. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Her heart stuttered. Marcus, please, she nodded. He took a deep breath. I've been in love with you for 15 years, he said. Since the moment I saw you across a ballroom, laughing at something your friend had said, with your hair escaping its pins and your eyes bright with joy. You were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. And I thought, there is someone extraordinary, someone worth knowing, someone worth loving. His voice was steady, but his hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. But you were married, and I told myself I was honorable, that I would never pursue another man's wife. So I married someone else and tried to forget you. And then Godwin died, and I thought, finally, I can tell her. But you were grieving, and I told myself it was not the right time. And then months became years, and I kept finding reasons to stay silent. And I think... He paused. I think I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you would not want me. Afraid you would look at me the way you looked at Godwin, with love and trust, and I would fail you the way he did. Afraid that I was not worthy of you. Augustina's eyes were burning with unshed tears. Marcus, I'm not afraid anymore. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm, his grip gentle, but firm. These past weeks, watching you fight for those children, watching you face down Osric and his thugs and the entire court system, I have never seen anything so magnificent. You are brave and fierce and good, and I refuse to spend the rest of my life watching you from across the room. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I am not asking you to forget your husband or pretend your marriage did not happen. I am not asking you to love me right away or make any promises you are not ready to make. I am only asking, let me be part of your life. Let me stand beside you. Let me help you raise those children and build this family and face whatever comes next. His gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw everything. The love he had carried in silence for so long, the fear of rejection, the hope that refused to die. Let me love you, Augustina. That is all I ask. For a long moment, she did not speak. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Then she reached out and touched his face, his jaw, his cheek, the silver threads at his temple. I don't know if I can love you the way you deserve, she said quietly. Godwin, I thought I knew him. I thought our love was real. And now I don't know if I can trust my own heart. Marcus turned his face into her palm and kissed it. Then don't trust your heart. Trust me. I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of you. I will be patient. I will be constant. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here. And if I am never ready, then I will still be here. He smiled, and it was the most vulnerable she had ever seen him. I've waited this long, Augustina. I can wait longer. She felt something crack open inside her, some wall she had built without knowing, some defense she had erected against ever being hurt again. I do not want you to wait, she whispered. I want to try. With you. I want to believe that love can be different this time. Marcus's breath caught. Do you mean that? I have 3 children sleeping upstairs who call me mother. I have a family I never expected and a life I never imagined. Everything I thought I knew has been torn apart and rebuilt in ways I could not have predicted. She smiled through her tears. Perhaps it is time to stop being afraid of unexpected things. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against hers. They stayed like that after a pause, breathing together. 2 people on the edge of something new and terrifying and wonderful. I'm going to kiss you now, he murmured, if you have no objections. None whatsoever. And when his lips met hers, soft and warm and full of promise, Augustina felt something she had thought she would never feel again. Hope. The next few weeks were a revelation. The guardianship papers were signed. Tobias, Clara, and Celia officially became Augustina's wards, protected by law from anyone who might try to take them away. Augustina hired more tutors for Tobias. She engaged a nurse for the twins. She began planning for their futures. Schools for Tobias, dowries for the girls, a life of security and opportunity that they had never dared to dream of. But something else changed, too. Something quieter, harder to name. The house felt different. Augustina felt different. For 3 years, she had been frozen in grief, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Now, suddenly, she was needed. She was wanted. She had purpose. She found herself smiling more, laughing at Celia's antics, marveling at Clara's solemnity, debating philosophy with Tobias, who had discovered a passion for ancient history. She was healing. They all were. Onafil. The weeks that followed the court victory were a time of quiet transformation. Augustina had expected to feel triumphant. She had won, after all. She had defeated Osric, protected the children, proven to the world that she was neither mad nor foolish. But triumph was not what she felt. What she felt was something softer and more complicated, a slow unwinding of tension she had not even known she was carrying. She found herself doing things she had not done in years. She walked in the gardens in the morning, breathing in the cold air, watching the frost melt from the roses. She read novels for pleasure instead of just correspondence and legal documents. She sat at the pianoforte and played the pieces she had loved as a girl, before marriage and disappointment had taught her to put away childish things. And she spent time with the children. Real time, not just supervised visits or instructional sessions. She taught Clara and Celia to walk, holding their tiny hands as they tottered across the nursery floor, catching them when they stumbled, cheering when they managed 3 steps in a row. She read to them every night, not the moral tales that governesses favored, but real stories. Stories with adventure and magic and happy endings. She took Tobias to museums and galleries, watching his face light up as he discovered art and history and science. She listened to him talk about his studies, asked questions, debated ideas. She treated him not as a charity case or an obligation, but as a person, a young man with thoughts and dreams and opinions that mattered. And slowly, imperceptibly, the house began to feel like a home. The servants noticed it first. They whispered among themselves about how the Duchess had changed, how she smiled now, how she laughed at dinner, how she no longer spent her evenings alone in her room with the curtains drawn. "She's come back to life," the housekeeper said to the cook one evening. Those children brought her back to life. And perhaps they had. Or perhaps Augustina had simply been waiting, all those years of grief and loneliness, for someone to need her, for a reason to keep going. Now she had 3. One evening, about 2 months after the trial, Tobias knocked on the door of her private sitting room. "Come in," she called. He entered slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. He was nervous. She could see it in the set of his shoulders and the way he would not quite meet her eyes. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting aside her book. "No, ma'am. I mean, Your Grace. He took a breath. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Sit down." He sat in the chair across from her, perched on the edge as if ready to flee at any moment. "I have been thinking," he said, "about my mother, about what you told me, about the letters you found." Augustina nodded, waiting. She loved him, didn't she? My father, even though he could never give her what she wanted, even though he kept her hidden like a shameful secret. "Yes," Augustina said quietly. "I believe she did." Tobias was silent for a moment. "Do you think he loved her?" It was a question Augustina had asked herself many times, reading and rereading those letters in the quiet hours of the night. Did Godwin love Mercy? Or was she simply convenient, a pretty distraction, a place to escape the pressures of his real life? "I do not know," she said honestly. "I think he cared for her. I think he was comfortable with her in a way he perhaps wasn't comfortable with me. But love," she shook her head. "True love doesn't hide. True love doesn't build a life on lies. Whatever he felt for your mother, it was not enough to make him brave." Tobias absorbed this. "And you? Did you love him?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to give the easy answer, the expected answer. Yes, of course, he was my husband. But something stopped her. I loved who I thought he was, she said finally. I loved the man who sat with me in the garden and read me poetry. I loved the man who held my hand when the doctors told us we might never have children. I loved the man who told me it did not matter, that we would be happy anyway. She paused. But that man wasn't real. He was a performance, a mask Godwin wore to keep me content while he lived his true life elsewhere. So did I love him? I loved a lie. And now that I know the truth, I am not sure that counts. Tobias nodded slowly. Then he said something that surprised her. I think he was a coward. Augustina blinked. What? My father. He was a coward. Tobias's voice was steady, his eyes finally meeting hers. He had 2 women who loved him, 2 families who needed him, and he was too afraid to choose, too afraid to tell the truth, too afraid to be a real father to me or a real husband to you. He just hid and pretended and let everyone else carry the weight of his secrets. He leaned forward. You are not a coward. You found out the truth, and instead of hiding from it, you ran toward it. You took us in when you could have turned away. You fought for us when you could have let Osric win. You chose us, even though we are the living proof of your husband's betrayal. His voice cracked slightly. My mother used to say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing the right thing even when you are afraid. You are the bravest person I have ever met. Augustina felt tears pricking at her eyes. She reached out and took his hand. Your mother sounds like a very wise woman. She was. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. I think she would have liked you. I think I would have liked her too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly, the house quiet around them. Tobias, Augustina said eventually. Yes? You called me ma'am and your grace when you came in. You have done that since the first night. You do not have to. He looked uncertain. What should I call you? Whatever feels right to you. She squeezed his hand. But I want you to know that I think of you as my son. Not my ward, not my charity case. My son, if you ever wanted to call me. Something else. She could not bring herself to say the word. It felt too presumptuous, too hopeful. Tobias was quiet after a pause. Then, very softly, he said, My mother used to sing to me at night, when I could not sleep. She would sit beside my bed and stroke my hair and sing the same song over and over until I drifted off. What song? A lullaby. I do not know where she learned it, but it always made me feel safe. He looked at her, his amber eyes, Godwin's eyes, but somehow warmer, bright with emotion. I have not felt safe since she died. Not until I came here. Not until you. Augustina could not speak. Her throat was too tight. I would like to call you Mother, Tobias said, if that is all right. She pulled him into an embrace, holding him tightly, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. That is more than all right, she whispered. That is everything. Now I want to pause here to tell you something important about what we are witnessing in this story. In 1840s England, the concept of adoption, as we understand it today, did not really exist. There were no formal legal processes for transferring parental rights from one person to another. Children who lost their parents were typically taken in by relatives, sent to workhouses, or left to fend for themselves on the streets. What Augustina was doing, taking in children who were not hers by blood and raising them as her own, was extraordinarily unusual. it was also legally precarious. Without blood ties or marriage, her rights over the children could theoretically be challenged at any time. But Augustina understood something that the law did not. She understood that family is not just about blood or legal documents. Family is about choice. It is about showing up day after day and choosing to love someone even when it is difficult, even when it costs you something, even when the world tells you that you have no right. Tobias, Clara, and Celia were not her children by birth, but they were her children by choice, and that, in the end, is what mattered. Ma mort forant. 6 months after the trial, Augustina married Lord Marcus Fairfax in a small ceremony at the chapel at Ashbury Park. The wedding was nothing like her first. No grand cathedral, no hundreds of guests, no elaborate gown designed to impress society. This time, there was only family, the children, dressed in their finest clothes. Lady Catherine Wentworth, who had become a dear friend. A handful of servants who had been with Augustina through everything. And Marcus, standing at the altar with tears in his eyes, looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever prayed. "I, Marcus Edward Fairfax," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "take thee, Augustina, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Augustina found that her voice was steady, not because she felt no emotion, but because she had never been more certain of anything in her life. "I, Augustina," she said, "take thee, Marcus, to be my wedded husband." And when he kissed her, gently, reverently, like she was something precious, Tobias cheered, and Clara giggled, and Celia yelled, "Kiss again!" at the top of her lungs. They did. The first anniversary of the children's arrival at Ashbury House fell on a gray October day, much like the day Augustina had first seen Tobias in the rain. She had planned a small celebration, nothing elaborate, just a special dinner with all, the children's favorite foods, and presents wrapped in colored paper. But when she came downstairs that morning, she found that the children had planned something of their own. The drawing room had been transformed. Paper flowers hung from the chandeliers, clearly cut by Tobias's careful hand. A banner stretched across the mantelpiece, painted in wobbly letters. "Thank you, Mother and Father." And in the center of the room, standing in a row like soldiers awaiting inspection, were Tobias, Clara, and Celia. Marcus stood behind them, grinning like a boy who had helped with a wonderful secret. Tobias was holding a small box. Clara was clutching a piece of paper, and Celia was holding a flower, a single white rose, slightly crushed from being gripped too tightly in her small fist. "What is all this?" Augustina asked, her voice catching. "We wanted to give you something," Tobias said, "to say thank you, for everything, for stopping the carriage, for fighting for us, for giving us a family." He glanced at Marcus, and something warm passed between them, the bond of a boy who had never had a father and a man who had always wanted a son. "Both of you," Tobias added quietly, "for giving us both of you." He stepped forward and handed her the box. Inside, nestled in cotton, was a locket, simple silver, heart-shaped. She opened it and found 4 tiny painted portraits: Tobias, Clara, Celia, and Marcus, their faces rendered in miniature with remarkable skill. "I commissioned it from an artist in town," Tobias explained, "so you can carry your whole family with you always." Augustina pressed the locket to her heart, unable to speak. Clara stepped forward next, thrusting the paper toward her. "I drawed you a picture," she said proudly. She was 3 now, old enough to hold a crayon and create chaos with it. Augustina looked at the drawing. It was a house, square, with a triangular roof and smoke coming from the chimney. In front of the house stood 5 figures now, 2 tall, 3 small. Above them, in Clara's uneven letters, were the words, "Our family." "It is beautiful," Augustina whispered. "I will treasure it forever." Finally, Celia toddled forward and held up the crushed rose. "Flower," she announced. "For Mama." Augustina knelt down and took the flower gently from her daughter's hand. "Thank you, my darling. It is the most beautiful flower I have ever received." Celia beamed and threw her arms around Augustina's neck. Marcus crossed the room and knelt beside them, gathering Clara and beckoning Tobias into the embrace, until all 5 of them were tangled together in a pile of arms and laughter and happy tears. And there, kneeling on the floor of her drawing room, surrounded by paper flowers and wobbling banners and the family she had built from hope and courage and love, Augustina wept. Not from sadness, not from grief, but from a joy so profound it felt like her heart might burst from trying to contain it. She had spent years praying for a family. She had spent years believing she was broken, defective, unworthy of the love she so desperately wanted. And now, finally, she understood. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting for the family that was meant to be hers, a family that didn't come from her body, but came to her through rain and darkness and impossible chance. A family she had chosen, a family that had chosen her back. 3 years passed. Tobias flourished at school, earning marks that surprised his tutors and made Augustina glow with pride. He had decided to study law. "So I can help people like us," he told her. "People who have no one to fight for them." Clara grew into a serious, thoughtful child who loved books and animals and asking questions that no one could answer. She had her father's eyes, but her grandmother's temperament. Careful, observant, always thinking. Celia remained the wild one, the laughing one, the child who climbed trees and ruined dresses and filled every room she entered with chaos and joy. She had Mercy's smile, Augustina thought sometimes. That same warmth, that same brightness. Lord Osric faded into obscurity. The scandal of the trial had destroyed his reputation, and he retreated to a small estate in the north, rarely seen in society. Augustina heard occasional rumors about his drinking, his debts, his increasingly desperate attempts to restore his standing. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a distant sort of pity. He had tried to destroy her, and he had failed. That was enough. Augustina herself changed too. The cold, closed woman she had been, the one who never smiled, who never let anyone close, who had built walls around her heart so thick that even grief could not penetrate them. That woman was gone. In her place was someone softer, someone who laughed at dinner and played games in the nursery, and sat on the floor with her children, even though it wrinkled her expensive gowns. Someone who had learned that love was not a weakness to be guarded against, but a strength to be embraced. She still thought about Godwin sometimes. She still wondered what their life might have been like if he had been honest with her from the beginning. But those thoughts no longer carried the sharp edge of betrayal. They were just thoughts. Memories of a man who had made terrible choices and paid for them in ways he never anticipated. His lies had brought her, Tobias, Clara, and Celia. His secrets had led her to the family she was always meant to have. Perhaps, in the end, that was his gift to her, the only real gift he ever gave. 6 months later, Augustina hosted a gathering at Ashbury House. Not a ball, not a formal event, but something smaller and more personal. A dinner for the people who had helped her through the darkest months of her life. Lady Catherine Wentworth was there, Dr. Price, Mr. Hargrave, the editor of the London Chronicle, even Mr. Kellaway, looking uncomfortable in formal attire. And the children, of course. Tobias, now 14, and growing taller every day, dressed in a suit that finally fit him properly. Clara and Celia, now over a year old, and toddling everywhere, getting into everything, filling the house with chaos and joy. After dinner, Augustina stood to address her guests. "I want to thank you all for what you did for me, and for these children. When Lord Osric came for us, I thought I would have to fight alone. I thought the world would turn its back on a widow trying to protect 3 orphans. I was wrong." She looked at each of them in turn. "You stood with me. You fought with me. And because of you, these children have a future." She paused, gathering herself. "I did not ask for this family. I did not expect it. 18 months ago, I was a woman alone, living in a house full of ghosts, believing that my life was essentially over. And then I saw a boy in the rain, holding 2 babies, and everything changed." She looked at Tobias. He was watching her with those serious amber eyes, Godwin's eyes, but warmer, kinder, untouched by the capacity for deception that had made his father such a convincing liar. "Tobias, will you come here, please?" He stood and walked to her side, nervous but trying not to show it. "I have something to say to you. To all 3 of you." She took a deep breath. "I know I am not your mother. Your mother was a woman named Mercy Adwell, who loved you more than anything in the world and gave her life bringing your sisters into it. I would never try to replace her." Tobias nodded, his eyes bright. "But I want you to know that you are my family now, not because of legal papers or court orders or blood, but because I choose you. I choose to love you, to protect you, to be here for you, for as long as I live." She reached out and took his hand. "You do not have to call me anything you are not comfortable with, but I want you to know that to me, you are my son. Clara and Celia are my daughters. This is your home, and nothing will ever change that." Tobias stood very still. Then, slowly, his face crumpled, not with sadness, but with something else, relief, joy, the release of years of fear and loneliness and desperate hope. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. "Thank you," he whispered. "Mother." Augustina held him tight, her own tears falling, freely now, and for the first time in longer than she could remember. She felt complete. And now, as I bring this story to a close, I want to pause and speak directly to you. This story is about many things. It is about betrayal and secrets, and the lies that people tell to protect themselves. It is about the cruelty of systems that value lineage over love and property over people. It is about a woman who discovered that everything she believed was a lie, and who chose to build something true from the wreckage. But most of all, it is about family. Not the family you are born into, but the family you choose. The family that finds you in the rain, lost and desperate, and says, "Come with me. I will keep you safe." Augustina did not give birth to Tobias, Clara, or Celia, but she saved them. She fought for them. She loved them with everything she had. And in doing so, she discovered something she had spent years searching for. She discovered that she was never barren at all. She had simply been waiting for the children who were meant to be hers. "5 years later, on a summer evening at Ashbury Park, Augustina stood on the terrace watching the sun set over the gardens. Behind her, she could hear Tobias, now 19, tall and strong and studying law at Cambridge, explaining something to Clara, who had inherited her birth father's eyes, but Mercy's gentle soul. Celia was chasing butterflies across the lawn, her laughter carried on the warm breeze. And Marcus was sitting in a garden chair, pretending to read a book, but actually watching his family with the quiet, contented smile of a man who had finally found where he belonged. The house was full of noise, full of life, full of love. Marcus had legally adopted all 3 children the year after their wedding. Tobias was now Tobias Fairfax, heir to the Earl of Dunmore. Clara and Celia were Ladies Clara and Celia Fairfax, with dowries that would make them the most sought-after young women in England when they came of age. But more than names and titles, Marcus had given them something money could not buy. He had given them a father, patient, steady, present. He attended Tobias's school events. He read stories to the girls every night. He held Augustina's hand in public and looked at her like she was the sun and moon and stars combined. He was nothing like Godwin. He was everything Godwin should have been. Augustina thought about her first husband sometimes. She thought about the man she had married, the life she had believed she was living, the lies she had swallowed for 10 years without knowing. She no longer felt anger toward him. That had faded long ago. What she felt now was something closer to pity. He had had everything: a wife who loved him, a fortune, a title, health, time, and he had squandered it on deception. He had died without ever knowing his daughters, without ever truly knowing his son, without ever experiencing the joy that Augustina now felt every single day. He had chosen secrets over truth, and secrets had consumed him. Augustina had chosen differently. She had chosen truth, even when it was painful. She had chosen love, even when it was complicated. She had chosen family, even when the world told her she had no right to it. And she had won. Marcus set down his book and walked over to join her at the terrace railing. He slipped his arm around her waist and pressed a kiss to her temple. "Happy," he murmured. "Completely." "Good." He pulled her closer. "Because I intend to keep you that way for the next 50 years. Tobias appeared at her other side. "You two are being disgustingly romantic again," he said, but he was smiling. "Get used to it," Marcus replied. "I have years of lost time to make up for." "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Augustina said, looking at both of them, her son, her husband, her family. "We are the lucky ones," Tobias said quietly. "You saved us. We saved each other." They stood together in silence, watching Clara and Celia play in the fading light. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and somewhere in the house, a servant was lighting the evening lamps. Augustina breathed in the cool evening air and felt something she had not felt in years, perhaps had never truly felt before. Peace. Not the absence of trouble, for trouble would always come. Not the absence of grief, for she still mourned the husband she thought she knew and the years she had lost to his deception. But a deeper peace, the kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be, doing exactly what you were meant to do. She had spent so many years searching for meaning. She had searched for it in her marriage, in her social position, in the endless round of balls and dinners and charitable committees that made up an aristocratic woman's life. She had searched for it in the children she could not have, the family she thought was denied to her. And all along, meaning had been waiting for her on a rain-soaked street corner, wrapped in rags, holding 2 tiny lives in his arms. "Mother," Tobias said quietly. "Yes?" "I want you to know something." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "When I was on the streets, when things were at their worst, I used to pray. Not for money or food or shelter. I prayed for someone to see us, really see us, not as beggars or nuisances or problems to be solved, but as people, as a family worth saving." His voice caught slightly. And then you stopped your carriage, and you looked at me, and I knew in that moment that my prayer had been answered. Augustina felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. "You were my answer too," she whispered. "I just didn't know I had been praying." He put his arm around her shoulders, and they stood together watching the sunset, watching Clara chase Celia through the garden, watching the last light of day paint their home in gold. This was family. Not the family she had been born into, not the family she had married into, but the family she had chosen, the family that had chosen her back, the family that had been forged in rain and despair and transformed by love into something unbreakable. And standing there, surrounded by everything she had almost lost and everything she had found, Augustina made herself a promise. She would never take this for granted. She would never forget how close they had come to missing each other entirely. She would wake up every morning grateful for the choice she had made and the lives that choice had saved, including her own. "Come," she said finally, taking Tobias's hand. "Let us go inside. It is getting cold, and I believe Cook has made your favorite pudding." He grinned, that boyish grin that reminded her of the child he had been, the child who had carried so much on his thin shoulders. "You spoil me. I have years of spoiling to make up for. Now come, before Celia eats it all." They walked together toward the house, toward the warmth and light that spilled from the windows, toward the sounds of laughter and the smell of dinner and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life. Behind them, the sun finished its descent, leaving the sky awash in stars. And somewhere, perhaps, Mercy Adwell looked down and smiled. Her children were home. "Mother," Tobias said after a while. "Yes? Thank you for stopping the carriage that day." Augustina smiled. "I have never once regretted it." "Mother," Tobias said after a while. "Yes? Thank you for stopping the carriage that day." Augustina smiled. "I have never once regretted it." And she never did. But there is one more scene I must share with you before we end. A moment that happened years later, when Tobias was a grown man with a law practice of his own, and the twins were young women of remarkable grace and intelligence. It was the anniversary of Mercy Adwell's death. Every year, without fail, the family traveled to the small village of Hartwell to lay flowers on her grave. A grave that Augustina had paid to mark with a proper headstone, one that bore the words, "Beloved Mother, her love lives on." This particular year, as they stood in the quiet churchyard with the autumn leaves falling around them, Tobias turned to Augustina with tears in his eyes. "I wish she could have known you," he said. "I wish she could have seen what you did for us, how you fought for us, how you loved us." Augustina took his hand. "I think she does know, somehow. I think the love we give to those who are gone does not simply vanish. I think it reaches them, wherever they are." Clara stepped forward and placed a white rose on the grave, the same flower Augustina had always associated with hope and new beginnings. Celia followed with a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked along the road. "Thank you," Celia whispered to the headstone, "for giving us life, for giving us Tobias, for being brave enough to love." They stood together in silence, 4 people bound not by blood, but by choice, paying tribute to a woman they had never known, but who had made all of this possible. And Augustina understood in that moment that family is not just about the people who are present. It is also about the people who came before, the ones who sacrificed, who loved, who laid the foundations upon which we build our lives. Mercy Adwell had loved Godwin, despite everything. She had raised Tobias alone, with no money, and no support, giving him everything she had. She had died bringing Clara and Celia into the world, her last breath spent on the children she would never see grow up. Her love had made this family possible, and Augustina's love had carried it forward. That was the truth at the heart of everything. Love does not end when we die. It continues in the people we leave behind. It echoes through generations, touching lives we will never know, shaping futures we will never see. Mercy Adwell was gone, but her love remained, in Tobias's determination to fight for justice, in Clara's stories about women who refused to be silenced, in Celia's passionate advocacy for children who had no one else, and in Augustina, who had learned from a woman she never met that love is not about possession or control. It is about giving everything you have, expecting nothing in return, and trusting that somehow, some way, your love will find its way to the people who need it most. I need to pause here and share something with you, something personal. I started this channel because I believe in the power of stories. I believe that the right story, told at the right time, can change a life. It can make someone feel less alone. It can give them hope when they thought all hope was gone. This story, the story of Augustina and Tobias, and Clara and Celia, is one of my favorites I have ever told. Not because it is the most dramatic or the most scandalous, though it has its share of both, but because it reminds me of something I think we all need to remember. We are not defined by what happens to us. We are defined by what we choose to do about it. Augustina could have chosen bitterness. She could have chosen to hate the children who represented her husband's betrayal. She could have turned away from them, let them suffer, told herself it was not her problem. But she did not. She chose love. She chose compassion. She chose to see those children not as symbols of her husband's lies, but as innocent souls who needed someone to care for them. And that choice transformed everything. It transformed her life. It transformed their lives. It transformed the very meaning of what it means to be a family. So if you are listening to this story tonight, and you are facing a choice between anger and forgiveness, between isolation and connection, between turning away and reaching out, I hope you will remember Augustina. I hope you will remember that one moment of compassion can change everything. I hope you will remember that family is not just about blood. It is about the people we choose to love and the people who choose to love us back. And I hope, more than anything, that you will choose love. Now, as we bring this story to its final close, let me tell you what became of everyone. Tobias grew to be one of the most respected barristers in England. He argued cases before the House of Lords, championed reforms that protected women and children, and was eventually offered a knighthood, which he accepted only on the condition that the ceremony acknowledge his mother, Augustina, as the woman who had made everything possible. Clara published 12 novels over the course of her life, each one more successful than the last. Her books were translated into French, German, Italian, and eventually read by women across Europe, who found in her stories the courage to imagine different lives for themselves. Celia never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to the causes she believed in. She helped establish 3 orphanages, lobbied Parliament for reforms to the poor laws, and was instrumental in creating programs that kept families together instead of separating them into workhouses. When she died at the age of 68, thousands of people attended her funeral, many of them men and women who had been saved by her work when they were children. And Augustina? She lived to see all of this. She lived to see her children become forces for good in the world. She lived to know that the choice she made on that rainy afternoon, the choice to stop, to see, to love, had rippled out into the world in ways she never could have imagined. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 74, surrounded by the family she had built. Her last words, spoken to Tobias as she held his hand, were these: "I was never barren. I was simply waiting for you." Thank you for listening to this story with me today. I told you at the beginning that my wife did not believe we could reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of January. I need your help to prove her wrong. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it made you believe in the power of love and family and second chances, then please, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what you thought. Every single subscriber brings us one step closer to our goal. Every single share puts this story in front of someone who might need it today. We are so close. We are almost there. And I truly believe, that with your help, we can do this. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for listening. And I will see you in the next story. Until then, remember, the coldest hearts can learn to love, and the darkest stories can find their way to light. This has been The Duke's Revenge. Good night until... And now, one final thought before I let you go. If you are listening to this story and you feel alone, if you feel like no one sees you, no one values you, no one would stop their carriage for you, I want you to know something. You matter. Your story matters. And somewhere out there, the family you are meant to have is waiting for you. Maybe it is the family you were born into. Maybe it is a family you will create. Maybe it is a family you will find in the most unexpected place, at the most unexpected time, when you have almost given up hope. But they are out there. I promise you. And when you find them, when they find you, everything will change. So do not give up. Do not stop hoping. Do not stop believing that love is possible, that connection is possible, that the loneliness you feel right now is not forever. Because it is not. Your story is still being written. And the best chapters, the ones that will make you weep with joy and gratitude, are still ahead. I believe that for you. I believe it with my whole heart. And I hope this story has helped you believe it too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this family. Now go, subscribe, share, comment, help us reach our goal. And I will see you in the next story. Until then, remember, the lesson Augustina taught us: one choice, one moment of compassion, one stopped carriage in the rain. That is all it takes to change everything. Good night, my friends. Sleep well, and dream of the family that is waiting for you.